One of the reasons I got into movie making and telling stories was like you're communicating something about the human experience, right? And having that response back is hugely gratifying and fulfilling as a creative person. And I've been missing that for a long time with my work. So YouTube has definitely filled that gap.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Creator Generation. This week we are joined by Eric, who is the creator behind a YouTube channel called Socal Flying Monkey. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Eric. First up, what's the deal with this name, Socal Flying Monkey? Because you are definitely not a monkey. You are from Southern California and you do fly. So maybe what's your channel and what's the deal with the name?
Yeah, so the flying part of the Socal Flying Monkey is, aviation related. My channel focuses on our aviation adventures in Southern California and beyond. And the monkey part is when I was 7 years old, I used to live in Brazil, and we took a family trip to the Amazon and stayed at this hotel where they have like this outdoor zoo with wild animals. And this monkey jumped down from a tree and stole my dad. At the time he was a smoker, stole his lighter, and the monkey bit me. So I got bit by a monkey when I was 7. So it's sort of like Spider-Man, who has like superpowers because he got bit by a spider. I got bit by a monkey, so I'm the Socal Flying Monkey.
So you're really good at climbing trees.
Like, yeah. Have you developed like monkey powers? Like, are there certain things you do really well?
Just flying, really. Like, the flying monkeys from Wizard of Oz.
Right.
See, really, the point is that the name really makes no sense. It's just supposed to be something fun and that you wouldn't take too seriously. So there's an element of like humor in the channel too. So I had to come up with some kind of name. I like monkeys, I like flying, and everything's in Southern California, so that's the SoCal part. So I put it all together.
It's actually it's distinctive. It does stand out. A lot of YouTubers, when they start, they often don't really think about the name, and they put it up. And if the channel does really well, they can end up in a really tricky place if they haven't thought about the name. There's a creator we knew. His channel was called Sexual Lobster, and he got to a really big size. And he's like, "This is ridiculous. Like this doesn't make any sense." He changed it, didn't he? In the end.
No, I'm pretty sure it's still Sexual Lobster, and he's back posting content.
Anyway, Socal Flying Monkey. Look, now I've got to say, I'm biased. I do love aviation channels, and Ant has talked about this before, and we have, but we've never had any YouTubers on previously who've been in the space. So I'm extra excited to have you here, Eric.
Brad is frothing. Absolutely.
I'm excited
frothing.
to be here.
I couldn't sleep last night. It's going to go into weird, wonderful places.
No, but one of the things I guess that's particularly interesting about your channel is obviously it shares your passion of aviation, but your background isn't in aviation, is it?
That's right. Yeah, I'm actually a professional cinematographer. I shoot movies, TV shows, and commercials here in Los Angeles, California, and all over the world. But and then I'm a private pilot, instrument-rated private pilot. So I just fly for fun, and I just combine those two things into the channel.
Cool. So I'm going to ask, probably the best place to start before we talk about YouTube is like, just tell us about your career progression. Like, how'd you get into it?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager growing up in New Jersey, I really enjoyed making movies with my friends, and that was what I did all the time. We just like go out into the woods, get a camera, make some movies. It was super fun. And then that ended up turning into like, a career. I didn't even know it could at the time. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. I didn't know you could go to film school. So I found out about film schools. I went to USC in LA and went to film school there, and then graduated. And then I was a camera assistant and a cinematographer kind of at the same time, building my reel and shooting pretty much any project that anyone would let me shoot at the time. Got a couple breaks with some short films that kind of went viral in their day. This was like pre-internet, really. This was like back in the 1900s. It was like 98. So got lucky with that stuff, met the right people through school, and just built my career as a cinematographer from there, and led to TV shows and movies, and now mostly focusing on shooting commercials.
Can you tell us about some of the TV shows and movies you worked on?
Sure. Yeah. I did a pilot recently for ABC and Warner Brothers that was a spin-off of a really popular show here in the US called The Middle. That's no longer on the air, but they spun off one of the characters and she was going to have her own show. So we shot the pilot for that. I did another pilot several years ago for a show on MTV called Awkward that ended up getting picked up and going to series. And I have been mostly interested in doing the pilot episodes and not continuing on with series necessarily because it's such a long commitment. And I'm pretty busy in the commercial space, which is kind of a good deal as far as the lifestyle of it goes, because you're not shooting every single day. On a TV show, you're shooting every day. It's long hours. So it's a little less shooting in commercials and a little more variety. So kind of stuck with that. But yeah, those are kind of the more recent projects that people may have seen other than the commercials that I've done.
And I thought I saw you did some stuff with Better Call Saul and maybe The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of stuff in conjunction with both of those shows. I've done a lot of like launch promos with The Walking Dead, where they have a new season where we do all like the beauty shots of everybody in slow motion or whatever. And I've done a couple commercials with some of the actors from those shows that have tie-ins to the show. It's sort of like branded commercials. We did one for the Dish Network, which is like a satellite provider, with one of the characters from The Walking Dead. And then for Better Call Saul, I've done a few short form series for them that are kind of little spin-offs of the show, like bonus content of the show. Short form, like comedy drama series. That's what they're calling them. They actually won 2 Emmys for those, which is awesome. Not really my cinematography didn't, but the actual program did, which was super exciting for everybody involved. But yeah, it's been great to work on those because the casts are, everybody involved in those is so incredible. The talent is incredible, and the cast is always great.
Yes, so that must be fulfilling to have a long established career in that space. So, what then made you decide, hey, I'm gonna try YouTube?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when the pandemic happened here, March of last year, March of 2020, the industry pretty much just shut down. All the production halted. I had jobs lined up, and they all said like, "Hey, we're pushing," and I could kind of tell it was going to be months until we were ramped back up again. So I took that opportunity to try to stay creative and make something, because when you go from making stuff all the time, being creative all the time, to all of a sudden turning that off, it's difficult. And I'm pretty restless. I can't just like sit and consume and just like watch Netflix all the time. Like, I just want to be creating stuff all the time. So I had seen a lot of other aviation YouTube channels, and for the last 2 years before that, I was thinking, man, I should probably do that. It looks like fun. It could be my own thing. I've got stories to tell. I've got things I want to say about aviation. I've got things I want to share about aviation. It'd be good to like meet other pilots through this and just share the passion for it. So the opportunity came up just because I was forced to have, I had nothing else that I had to do for work. And the opportunity to like take that time and put it to being creative came up, and I decided to jump on it. So one of the things that really attracted me to it was this was like another element of it. It wasn't just having the time, was that in shooting commercials, there's a lot of times when the network that's involved with the branded, if it has a show tie-in, or the ad agency, or the product, or the production company, or the director, or somebody else has they all have opinions about things. And it can be frustrating because you're just there. I realize my job is there to serve what they want. And that's what it is. So I go into that 100%, but it can be frustrating at times creatively, especially after you shoot something and then you see how it turns out. And it's like, I wanted some of that creative freedom. That was a big part of it. Is like, this is going to be my own thing. I'm going to shoot this how I want. This is going to be the story that I want to tell. I'm going to do it completely on my own terms. And I'm just going to put it out there. And so that was a big draw for me.
Nice. And then what was the starting point? Like, did you say, hey, I'm going to make just a video? Or do you have something in mind you wanted to really make for YouTube?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think the very first thing I did was just like a quick snippet of like how some part of the aircraft worked, like the avionics, this like new system I had, just a little 1-minute thing about how it worked just to try it out. And then I put that on, but I wasn't even thinking like, I was just thinking maybe this will be useful for somebody. And then I thought, and I was doing this even before I had the extra time with the pandemic. I was just sort of like, oh, maybe I'll put some stuff up just to do it. But I really jumped into it when I had more time. And then I put up this, my daughter and I flew up to Big Bear, which is, like about an hour flight from LA. It's in the mountains. And we just like flew up there, grabbed a cup of coffee and like came back. And it was just really about like spending time together that day. And I put that on there. And I think that was the first one where there was like a story and there was some heart to it. And I put like a voiceover to it. And I thought like, yeah, I want to do more of this stuff. And I also want to tell the stories of our family adventures. So like, I'll leave this behind. Like this will always be there in 10 years. We'll look back on it as a family. Maybe when I'm gone, my kids will look back on it and be like, yeah, I remember that trip. That was cool. It's not necessarily just family trips, but there's more to it than that. But I think it would be also a cool memory. So that was one other thing that like was in the genesis of the channel. That was a cool thing I also wanted to do.
Now, hey, we don't, like I said, we've had tons of different creators on the show. I've liked a bit of the content, but it's rare. We talk. I like a lot of the content there, but like YouTube is a passion platform, right? People will typically tap into other creators they can associate with and content they really really like. And like your channel is one of the channels I'd watch like completely. I don't typically watch a complete channel, but I did work through every video you had and watch them all because that's an area I love, and it's good to sort of talk about that because you can see how that passion translates. You can see why audiences get so connected to the creators and the content they make. Have you ever thought that like how the impact of your content, like this is something that people really love and they're literally sitting there and loving all the stuff that you make and your creative output?
Yeah, that's one thing that I've really enjoyed about the YouTube experience and that was missing from my work also was that I shoot a commercial and it goes out and I don't know if people see it. They probably don't even want to watch it. They're like forced to watch it. And I get no feedback, no interaction with the audience. And one of the reasons I got into movie making and telling stories was like, you tell a story and you connect with an audience, you're communicating something about the human experience, right? Like, and having that response back is hugely gratifying and fulfilling as a creative person. And I've been missing that for a long time with my work. So YouTube is definitely, these videos have filled that gap. And I get a lot of comments from people that say, hey, I love your stuff. You really inspired me. I've been thinking about getting my pilot license and I'm starting doing it. Or my wife and I, my family were watching your stuff and she was really against all of this. And now she sees what you're doing with your family. I'm like, she's totally on board. So we're going to jump into it. Maybe we're going to buy a plane and take these adventures. And that stuff is amazing. Like people are reacting to something I'm creating and it's like moving them to action. What I think is a positive action, spending more time with their family or pursuing a dream that they had. Like as a creative person, like that's everything. Like that's all that you really ever want. You want to make stuff, put it out there and have people moved by it a little bit in one way or the other. And it's really gratifying as a creator.
It's interesting that you talk so much about the audience and the audience experience and like the impact the content has on the audience. And particularly when a big advertising background where like the audience is important, but the main service is to the brand and the product. So it's a interesting dichotomy there, I think, and hearing you talk like that. And do you think that approach, like that audience first almost mentality, or like it's such a big part of it, helps you or impacts what you create, or do you just make whatever you're going to make? You're going up to Big Bear with your daughter, so you're like, well, this is my story, and it doesn't matter if anyone likes it, or do you think about that process of audience interaction and how they're going to receive the video before you make it or once you've made it?
Yeah. So to be honest, like in the beginning, I was just sort of like, I'm just making this stuff because I want to make it. It's for me creatively. I want to connect with other people, but like, I just want the creative satisfaction out of it. I'm going to noodle it until I'm happy with it. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to put music. I'm going to color it. Like, I'm just going to take my time on it. And then as I got more into it and the channel started taking off, I thought, well, maybe it's a good idea to try to like grow the channel like as much as I can and try to get some income from it and like build it up, because there's other things that I want to accomplish with it that I could accomplish and reach a wider audience and do more things with it in the future, if the audience were bigger and I got like some sponsorship and stuff like that. So I started thinking a little bit more about like, well, what do people want to see? But I'm still sort of like, well, I could track this popular thing down right now and I can make this video. I could put a camera on myself and just like record me talking about this particular avionics review, this and that. Like people would watch it, it could grow, but I'm not creatively going to be happy with it. So it's definitely a push and pull, but I do think about how the audience is going to perceive it and if they're going to enjoy it now, and a little bit more of like the YouTubey metric stuff and like the strategy of it and stuff, which I wasn't really thinking about in the beginning.
Yeah, awesome.
So when you like told your family or your wife, "Hey, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel," and now I'm a YouTuber, what was the reaction?
They were like, yeah, that's cool. My my oldest teenage daughter is sometimes not stoked about it. She's like, oh my God, it's embarrassing. And I'm like, no, it's not. And then I show them like the comments or the emails from people who are like, hey, this really moved me and motivated me seeing your family. Like then she's like, oh yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. So, and we have some ideas and stuff that we're working on now that they're not as stoked as I'd like them to be about, just because it's like it is a little embarrassing stuff that we're going to be doing, but that's all right. I mean, they're and now they're like really on board. My wife is super cool, and she's like on board with. She's like, yeah, I want to do more of it. Like, let's make it as good as we can, as big as we can. It'd be great. So,
Let's
yeah.
be honest. If you were Mr. Beast, and you had kids, they would still be embarrassed by you. They'd be like, "Oh, Dad, get off
Yeah.
YouTube." You're a dad with kids. No matter what you do, it's going to be embarrassing to them.
Yeah,
True.
but it's funny. The thing about it is you're actually a big YouTuber. But I mean, your channel's approaching 80,000 subscribers, which is a very good amount of subscribers. So you're a decent sized creator. So it would be interesting, like for your daughter to say, "Hey, my dad's a YouTuber, and he's actually a successful YouTuber." That would be an interesting thing to have, I guess. But look, I understand,
It's hard
especially
to impress them, especially with like things in the movie business. I'm like, I worked with so and so today. They're like, okay, well, who's that? Or like whatever. They don't. They're like, okay, whatever.
Well, speaking of the movie business and the TV and the advertising business, what do they think of you starting a YouTube channel or YouTube in general? Like, what's the perception?
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't really cross it over so much. Like, I don't really tell people that I work with too much about, hey, check out my YouTube channel. So my friends who are also in the business are like, yeah, that's cool, man. We get it. Like, that looks like a lot. It looks like you're having a lot of fun and whatever. They're all cool with it, but I don't know what people think. Maybe there's in general, like, oh, it's just a YouTube, that people maybe like look down on it in a certain way, like just be like, oh, that's not real, like filmmaking or whatever, because it's YouTube. And that in certain YouTube stuff, yeah, like it's not the same as what we're doing, but I try to take my skills as a cinematographer and storytelling skills and make like the most professional product and everything, which is not as common on YouTube, but I think it can still be successful there and appreciated there. I'd get a lot of comments that people are like, man, your editing and cinematography and storytelling is so great. Like, it's obvious you're a pro. I'm like, that's cool. Thank you for noticing. I put a lot of work in it. That's awesome.
What is the difference though, like between the two then? Like, what are you taking with you to YouTube and what are you parking at the door and leaving at the more traditional filmmaking?
Yeah. So the main thing I'm taking with me is storytelling, how to tell a story in a compelling way, and how to think about each video as its own complete story. So everything I learned in like film school about how to tell stories, using all the tools in your toolkit to tell a story, like visually, the sound design, the music, everything, locations, everything is there to serve the stories. And when I'm editing, I'm thinking, okay, what's the story? Like, what are people watching? Why do they care in this moment? Why are they still watching this? Like, what? So the storytelling stuff is what I really bring. and I bring all the technical know-how and stuff, but I think like pretty much anybody can learn that. And I'm not using the full depth of my knowledge as a cinematographer or the full skills of my professional cinematography, but I am bringing a lot of elements into it in order to elevate the production value of it. You know, like I'll shoot up flat profile and I'll color grade it, because I do color grading also for my professional work. And so like my stuff looks as good as I can make it look with a GoPro. So I'm using everything I know about that camera, even though I don't really use it for work that much. But I use other equipment, other cameras that I use professionally sometimes on those videos. So I do that. I guess what I'm not bringing in is some of the is just like working with a crew and working with like bigger equipment, more expensive equipment, and like more professional cameras and stuff.
And just to like I used to work in advertising, particularly in production, so I know what the sets and stuff look like and the difference. But maybe from your perspective, you can explain what does like a commercial set look like? How many people and like how much content are they getting compared to like you as a YouTuber?
Yeah, so a commercial set could be 50 to 100 people. Typically my jobs will have in my camera department be like me, and I've got a first assistant camera, second assistant camera, and then like a loader tech person. And then I've got a gaffer and a key grip on the grip and electric side. And each of those guys has three or four men or women that work for them. And I oversee those. So yeah, crew of like 50 and big trucks lined up all up and down the street. I'm sure people have seen, behind the scenes in movies and stuff, and cranes and steady cams and all that stuff. And then on the YouTube side, it's like me with like a little DJI Osmo Pocket running around and a couple GoPros, or like a little Sony camera, a little DSLR. But man, the technology is so good now, and these cameras are so small and affordable that like we're able to shoot amazing looking stuff with just this little thing that doesn't cost that much money, and cut it on your iMac or whatever. Like it's so empowering and amazing. Because when I started out, it was not like that. We had to beg Kodak to give us 1,000 feet of film to shoot, and beg Panavision to give us a free camera. That's how I started. And it was like a major deal just to shoot anything that would look remotely good. Now anybody can shoot something that looks really good with, enough like studying about it.
What do you find the most transferable skills are in the YouTube space? Like what works really well, and then what is completely you have to throw out the window?
What works really well, I'd say, like if you're a good editor, that's number one. Like even beyond like my profession in cinematography, but I did take editing classes at USC, and then I did edit professionally when I was first starting out on a couple like TV shows, like competition reality shows back when they were kind of in their beginning stages. So yeah, as an editor, that's a huge skill that translates really well. And then wait, what was the second part of the question?
Like, yeah, what doesn't, like, are there certain things that you were taught in film school that you just, when you try to apply to YouTube, it just don't work at all?
I would say like some of the story stuff where it's like a little more complicated. YouTube tends to be like, here's like the title of the video, and that's why people are watching it. And the video should sort of be maybe about just like that one thing. And sometimes I'll like in my earlier videos, I was telling a story, but there was a lot of different aspects of the story and things that I wanted to communicate. And I was like, I eventually realized like the simpler videos with like, hey, this video is just like about this one thing. It's like, oh, this is the approach that I did into this airport, and I got disoriented in the clouds. Like the video is if it's just about that, it's going to be more successful than it is a whole story that has a lot of beats and and it's still a great story and it has that part in it, but people sort of like, just because of the structure of like the title of it and a thumbnail, that's why they're watching it. And then there's an expectation there from it. It's just the platform and the format kind of lends itself to like, just tell this one simple thing. So that's the thing that does translate and doesn't translate, if that makes sense.
I mean, you talked about, obviously you filmed your aviation adventures. I guess there is flying a plane is already, not tricky enough, but it requires a fair bit of concentration. when you add, filming in there, that must be a bit of a challenge as well, especially when you're trying to think about the shot you're getting when you're trying to fly a
Right.
plane.
It's something like that. Some occasionally other pilots will give us um, a little bit of flack about. Just be like, oh, what's a distraction to have cameras in the cockpit, and it certainly can be. But I prepare myself, like I set everything up and I record it and start the audio, and then that's it. And I don't think about it. I don't think about what's going to make it for the story. And I tend in my videos not to like directly address the camera like a vlog and be like, here we are flying, blah, blah, blah. Like I don't really do that. I just like fly, we do our thing. And then I look at the footage and I go, okay, this was an interesting part of the flight. I'm going to make a story, and I use voiceover. So I'm really not thinking about that part of it. When we're on the ground and before the flight or after, or we're at a destination, then I'm thinking like, oh, let me get this shot. I brought my drone to get this thing, or I want to shoot these kinds of things. But when we're actually flying, like I'm just really just flying. The cameras are there, sort of capturing it.
In a couple of your videos, I mean, you've seen, all pilots sort of have close calls, but I've seen a couple of your videos where you actually have been recording, and there have been some interesting close calls which you managed to capture. You want to just sort of chat to us about how when that well, firstly tell us what they were, and then how that translated into a video.
Yeah, we had one where we were flying, and then there was another plane that we could see on our traffic alert system that was close by, and I couldn't see him visually, and then he turned towards us, and it was just kind of really tense when you see on the iPad, basically you have an iPad, and you see the traffic target like coming towards you closer and closer, and you can't see him. Where is he? Everybody's looking. So that was one instance where it was kind of nerve wracking. And then there was another where, another video where we had like really gusty winds. We had to go around 2 or 3 times before we would land. And it was at the edge of my personal minimums as far as like crosswinds and stuff. So tricky landings. And in both those cases, like I'm definitely not thinking about the shooting or the story or anything. I am, after I land, go, oh man, we got that. People are gonna really like that. There's a good drama there or whatever. But yeah.
I think there was one where your one of the cargo compartments popped open while you were flying over Hollywood, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. So the front baggage compartment on the airplane there's like a front baggage compartment. There's a baggage door, and I forgot to lock it and latch it. I think it might have popped it, but as I was flying, like going to look at the Hollywood sign and make a couple turns, doing a little sightseeing flight at sunset, like on my own, just for fun, the thing pops open, and I've got stuff in there. I've got equipment in there that can fall out over Hollywood. And it was just crazy. I was, terrified that, so I didn't make any right turns. It was like only left turns, and had to like call air traffic control. And I wasn't far from my home airport. It was only a few miles. So it was maybe like 4 or 5 minutes in the air with this thing open. There was a lot of dangerous aspects of that. Luckily, everything worked out. And when I got on the ground, I was like, oh, I hope those cameras recorded, because this will be a really good lesson for other people too. Like, hey,
Yeah.
you got to do a better pre-flight than I did.
Yeah.
Part of my channel is like showing my mistakes too, which not a lot of people in the aviation space do.
It is good because you see the community sort of rally around that. Like so many of them talk about like, what that meant to see that, and like the lessons that like they learned from that, and then they reflect on their own experience. It's like it's a really, strong community builder, and like people share a lot of information across that, which is great. YouTube is not just an entertainment area, but it is somewhere where people can learn more about sort of what they love as well, which you sort of highlighted. But I guess, at the end of the day though, when you are able to capture that must be also, it's scary and it's rewarding though, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is rewarding, and it is nice when, like, I'll put up things where I've made mistakes on certain approaches, or just things I could have done better, and I talk about it in the videos to hold myself accountable, because I want to be the best pilot that I can be. And I get comments where like, hey, this is a really refreshing approach, or like, good on you for, showing your mistakes. Nobody else really is doing that. I get a lot of feedback like that. I think it's a valuable thing for the aviation community, because it'll make aviation safer for everybody if we're having this attitude, like not a macho attitude about it. That's one of the things they teach you in the training for being a private pilot, is a hazardous attitudes. One of them is like this macho attitude, like, oh, I'm so awesome about this. I make no mistakes. And I take the opposite, like, hey, you can come with your criticism, because I will hold myself to account. If I hold myself to account, it'll make this community better. It'll make it safer. And I think that's, and it'll make my flying safer too, selfishly.
And
so I think it's valuable.
I mean, we talked about like obviously some of the trickier flights, but like, can you tell us about like what was the most popular video for you that you launched? That really was there one that really launched your channel forward, or was it just a series of videos that kept growing the channel growing?
Yeah, there was one video, and it was pretty much right after the pandemic started, and I wanted to make a video about the renovation of my airplane, because I bought this airplane and we did everything, replaced the engine, all the whole panel, the electronics in it, and the interior, pretty much like everything. It's like buying like a super beat up classic car and like making it almost like new again. So I wanted to tell the story of the renovation, and I was like, man, I want to make this interesting, because I don't think anybody just wants to watch like a dude sit and talk about like how they like replaced like the carpet in their airplane. Right. So that's not that great. So I did it in a style that was like this TV show Drunk History, where people tell a story and then the actors like mouth the words of the person telling a story, and there's a lot of like comedy elements in it. So I did that, and that video kind of just took off. And as I was making it, I remember calling my brother and going like, hey, I'm working on another video, and I'm pretty sure this video is going to be really popular with pilots, because like they love to see these transformations of the airplanes, and I think it's going to be really entertaining. I've never seen anybody do it in this way before. And so that video just like totally took off and has been the most popular one. It has over 1 million views now, which I think it's pretty good for an aviation video. I mean, I see videos that have way more views than that on YouTube, but for my channel, it's been the most popular one.
Yeah,
Tell yourself short of 1 million views on any video
is good.
Is good. I mean, I remember watching that, I think when we were in a hard lockdown down here in Melbourne, and like everyone probably knows already, I'm not a aviation buff by any means, but it's very much like one of those, like you use the analogy of like doing up your car or a van, like a renovate, but it's like, such a really great story that it like doesn't matter what your passion sort of carried it, and the way you told that story, rather than like, it doesn't matter if you like planes or if you're into cars or whatever. It's kind of like the same reason people love watching West Coast Customs or anything like that. But even a higher, your video would be a higher production value than those TV shows. For that. So no, it's really interesting to see how like the niche passion can sort of transcend that, and like I'm sure that the 1 million people that have watched that aren't all aviation buffs for sure. There's at least one like me, but like I think that's the kind of content that goes beyond the super flight crew nerd people nerding out on the intimate detail of the plane.
Transcended in some way like that the niche audience. And the challenge for me is like, how do I make all my videos do that? Because I would love them to, but I think that's a tough challenge for a specifically aviation centric YouTube channel. And I have some ideas that I think I'm working on that I think will accomplish that in their own, but I think a lot of the channel is still going to be like nerdy pilot stuff, because I'm into that, and I think like I want to tell those stories too, and I can't totally figure out a way to like make those have such a broad appeal, because they're just like wonky pilot stuff.
Well, you could just buy a new plane every
week. It could be a plane renovation show. That could be really popular, actually. There'd be a lot of people who are into that. Hey, but one thing that's interesting about your channel, usually what we tend to see is that people tend to add more production values to make their videos better and appeal to more of an audience. But on YouTube, that really makes a big difference. Like if the connection isn't there, if the audience isn't engaged generally, no matter how much production value you put into it, it doesn't make a difference. And you can still have a hard outcome from a video that's brilliantly produced, whereas a video that could be done on a phone with zero production value you can kill it, right? So it comes down to engagement. What you think what you've managed to do is take those skills and add some production value, especially with that video you were talking about with the renovation one. You added that production value, but the story was so good and so enticing and so open to so many different people. I think it translated well and it worked well on the platform, and I think it's straddling that gap between the right amount of production value but not at the expense of the story and the engagement, which is something I think a lot of YouTubers really sometimes will struggle to get right.
I think a lot of times the production value doesn't matter at all. And even in like the professional work, like there's a minimum, but that we have to meet. But sometimes a lot of times the story can just totally transcend it, and it's so compelling and engaging that it doesn't matter. And on YouTube for sure, like, and it's a little bit for me, like I spend a lot of time on my videos for my own creative satisfaction. And sometimes I'm like, dude, stop spending so much time on these videos because people don't really care. Like sometimes they don't care about, oh, the color is this, and I put a little window here and make this exactly right, and or mix it just right, and the music comes in and I edit the music, and then I'll watch other stuff where it's just like they just slap the track on it and they just do an abrupt cut over here, and I'm like, oh my God, like I could never live with myself if I did that. Because like I come from a different background, but I'm trying to like let go of that, but I'm also doing this for my own creative satisfaction.
Yeah,
so
fair
it's
enough.
this constant like push and pull. I always have this battle in editing, and I still just spend time on it until I'm happy with it. And I think
So-
I'll probably just stick with that, because once I stop doing that, then like I'll just go, like might as well just be shooting the commercials for everybody else,
yeah,
so I got to do it for me too.
it's fun.
Hey, Eric, we actually, speaking of commercials for everyone else, we spoke about transferring your skills over to YouTube, but what are you taking back to the commercial world? Like, what do you like? Is there anything that you've learned that
Oh yeah.
you're coming back on set and you're like, hey guys, well, that next
I love
pitch,
this question. Yeah, because what's happened with the budgets here now that we have, everybody wants to shoot with smaller crews because of the virus stuff. So, the crews are smaller. So we've had to get a little scrappier with what we're doing. And it's been awesome because I'm going in and I'm talking to the people that I've worked with for a long time and saying like, I've been doing some like stuff on my own a little bit. Like and those skills that I've developed a little bit more, like, oh, just like, yeah, I can make this look good with barely anything because I'm like doing it all the time now. And yeah, I'm bringing that back to set for sure. Like I just had a job where it was with this musician, with Raphael Sadiq in his studio, and it was me and one other person, and we had 3 cameras, and like there's like 50 people on the Zoom for the clients and the network and everybody, and it's me and one other guy, a friend of mine, and we set up like 3 cameras, and one's on a motorized slider and this and that, and it's just like we had to use like lightweight stuff that was easy to move around, and like a little more prosumery cameras, but applying all of my like lighting knowledge from like my real jobs, and then applying a lot of this like do-it-yourself camera stuff from YouTube, and it just like came together. And the thing is, it was for Lexus, and like it's not out yet, but it looks awesome. Like everybody was super happy, and I was like, man, the 2 of us did this. Like this would normally be like a crew of 20 for sure. And there was 2 of us. It was
wow.
Yeah. So
and is it like, is the content slightly different as well? Like, have you replicated what a crew of 20 would do, or does it have a different feel to it as well?
No, we're doing just like the same stuff we were doing before,
wow.
but with fewer people. And all the jobs are really getting like that, where it's just like, oh no, they want to cut it down for, COVID reasons. Everybody's got to stay 6 feet. And it's like, yeah, it's more work now than it's been, and it's with fewer people. So this crossover is really happening. It's going to just keep going. The stuff I see on YouTube. I mean, I also watch a lot of like camera review stuff from like people who want to be in more professional space, and they have like a YouTube channel about like, here's the latest Sony camera. I'm like, their stuff is looking better and better, and things are just really converging in that way. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's it is interesting. Like you're probably you probably got now a little bit more of a lead given your new skills or revised skill set based on your YouTube experience. But also, I mean, it's so much. I mean, that content, YouTube content, that what they call short form content, I guess, across all those short form platforms is so prolific now, and it's such a big part of people's viewing habits. 5-10 years ago, it was still mainly TV, and then this YouTube and everything else was on the side. But now some people say, well, primarily their watching habits are around this short form social content, and then they got TV on the other side of that. So those skills are obviously going to become more and more valuable, especially in across everything to do with camera work and cinematography. So it would be interesting to see how that evolves. Do you have any thoughts about how that might evolve further?
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to go. I mean, I still think there's there's a huge. I mean, it's like the golden age of television now. For so many shows are being made on like Netflix, all the streaming services, and these are like high budget shows, high production value shows. Like the demand is still there for those, or at least they're making a lot of that stuff. But then there's a lot of demand also on the YouTube side. So I think there's a little bit of a convergence with people maybe stepping back and forth, or at least the quality of YouTube coming up. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with like the actual, the Netflix type shows. I think they'll kind of stay where they are. I think just like the YouTube quality for some things is just going to come up. I guess. I don't know.
Interesting to see where it all goes.
On that note, where does it all go? It's time for my favorite segment. Where we get to go down the YouTube or internet rabbit hole. Like that segue? I'm working on them. I'm trying to make them really radio segues. Eric, this is where I get to find out and find where the depths of the internet has taken you lately. Where has the YouTube or internet rabbit hole led you astray, or led you to somewhere you wanted to go?
Oh, so yeah, I've been really mostly watching like DIY engineering project videos, with starting with like Mark Rober, who's like huge YouTuber, but all the channels like that, because my daughter is 13, she's into like making stuff. We actually took like Mark Rober's like monthly course on engineering, and we made a couple projects together. So we've been watching like all these engineering kind of like project things. So, and that sort of just goes on and on and on.
Well, that's killer. Fred, where have you been?
I can't remember the channel, but it's a channel that talks about the physics behind certain things. Like it could be a machine or how something works, and they'd make it really accessible. And they said, this is how like this helicopter worked, or this building worked, and the physics behind it and how it stands. And so I was like, this is really like fascinating. I just found myself one night just just watching endless videos about it, and I'm like, I feel like I'm super interested in the physics of things now.
We'll have to find out what that channel is and add that to the show notes or something. Or
I got to find it. It's one of those things that you watch and then you're like, that was really great, and then you just forget what was that exactly. Again, I didn't watch it enough, but there was I think because it was something to do with aviation, and then they were talking like different designs of planes, and I think he'd done one on a plane, and that's how I got onto the channel. Like it was one of the suggested videos, as the algorithm likes making these connections, and then from there I went down his channel across all the explanations he created, which was pretty awesome. He's an Irish guy, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, we've got to look that up.
Awesome. We'll find out. Well, yeah, speaking of, like the rabbit hole that takes you down, because I think in a previous episode I mentioned Chad and JT goes deep, but I think the algorithm sort of sent me down that rabbit hole beyond those guys. But I ended up on a very new channel, and I think I've just got it written down, The Inspired Unemployed, and it came up in the recommended, and I was like, cool, clicked on it. It's their first video on this channel, and it's called The Untold Story of the Inspired Unemployed, and it's just two Aussie guys sitting in a paddock, like out in the country, having beers on a couple of camping chairs, telling their story about being kind of slackers, essentially. Funny guys, but like they've got like 16,000 subscribers. They've just released their second video in like yesterday, and that video had 100,000 views and was like trending number 8 in Australia and YouTube. And I'm like, the rabbit hole led me there, and it was actually quite good. And their first video was very, very simple, like two idiots drinking beers, telling stories. And but yeah, there you go, Eric. Like I guess the story, right? Like it didn't have to be whiz bang trickery. But yeah, it's a good story, and it's an interesting one. So that's what the rabbit hole works. Like the algorithm knows me well now. So yeah, that's where I've been.
Well, on that note, we actually have run out of time. But Eric, thanks so much for joining us. Look, before we do sign off, do you have, you are pretty new to YouTube. Do you have any tips for anyone who's jumping onto the platform who might be new to it and thinking about jumping into it now, that this is a good time to do it? Like, what would you say? The top maybe 2 or 3 takeaways for someone starting.
I guess my one takeaway is just to tell the compelling stories that you're passionate about, and think of if the channel, if it makes sense for your channel, think about your videos as stories that you're going to tell that people can relate to, and that somehow like illuminate something about, you know, or that's relatable to other humans, you know, like a human aspect to it. I mean, there's some channels that don't fit that, but for the most part, like that can generally be applied to everything. So to tell the most compelling story, and then, you know, share. Everybody says like, you know, make stuff that you're passionate about, and I think that's true, because the way that I'm doing stuff, it's a lot of work, and it can also be like, I worked on, you know, we did this video about us going paragliding, and I was so excited about it, and it had like so much heart to it. It was like I put so much work into it, and it was like one of the videos that did the worst on my channel, and I was so bummed out about it. So yeah, I think like what you're tell stuff that you're passionate about, because if you're not loving the process of it, you're not passionate about telling stories, when you have those setbacks, they're going to defeat you a little more than they would if you know you're still enjoying actually doing it. Yeah, and the other one is just try to keep things simple from a storytelling aspect, and think about what your audience wants to see and what you want them to get out of watching what you're making.
Great advice. Very good advice, actually. Especially from someone who's come spend a long time in the industry. It fits very well with both spaces. So thanks very much for joining us. And yeah, hopefully we'll chat to you again soon.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was super fun.
Create a generation. Look on the mic.